Welcome in. It is Big Ten today on a Friday. We are presented by Rally House. Great to have you with us. I always look forward to Fridays because football is close at hand, and I get to talk to the two of you, Jerry DiNardo, Dave Wannstedt. I won't say in which order. I look forward to things more, but
Speaking of that subject,
yes.
the problem with Fridays is like when this is done, it's all downhill the rest of Friday because I don't get to sit between you two guys.
That's right.
So.
Well, we could go out to lunch or something.
I'm busy.
You come to my grandson.
No, I can't.
So it's not that big a problem.
I got
lots of ways to rectify it.
We were talking little kids football. You can come to the football with me.
We were talking about destroying little kids football.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different conversation.
We're calling NFL offensive line coaches to help the
fifth
guys
grade
block
football
the zone
blocking
play.
schemes. But anyway, we digress. Let's get into our big story, and it is the football weekend, and how better to break it down than with our big board. 8 games in all. It starts tonight in New Jersey, Rutgers in Washington. 3 games at noon Eastern tomorrow. We have unbeaten Indiana taking on Maryland. Little brown jug on the line as well. USC hosts Wisconsin. That is the lone mid-afternoon Eastern game. And then 3 evening games, all involving top 10 teams. Ohio State and East Lansing. Oregon visiting the Bruins. And the one battle of 2 ranked teams is number 19 Illinois traveling to Happy Valley to battle the Nittany Lions. And so, fellas, as it's the only ranked game, why don't we start there? What's the most interesting X and O part of this matchup?
Okay, James Franklin has had 3 defensive coordinators since he's been at Penn State and 6 offensive coordinators. The one thing that has stayed consistent with his coordinators is whoever coaches the defense, it's Tom Allen now, as we both all know, is a pressure guy. And so I think the most interesting part of the X and O is Tom Allen's defense pressuring Barry Lunney's offense, who's the offensive coordinator at Illinois. So far, Luke Altmaier, especially at Nebraska, has handled pressure. I would suspect, Coach, that he's going to have to handle it Saturday. It's a whiteout. It's going to be hard to communicate.
It's not technically a whiteout. Whiteout energy.
Yeah.
No,
whiteout energy. Okay.
It's like the 12th man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, Brett, what the heck does that mean? But anyway, I know it's a tough place to play. It's a tough place to communicate to your quarterback. But Altmaier has been really good under pressure this year. He's going to have to be good tomorrow.
Yeah, I kind of look at it and say if Altmaier's going to be good, which he's been outstanding, he's almost breaking my Tommy DeVito records, okay, a couple years ago.
You love some Tommy DeVito.
I love Tommy DeVito. Anyway, he, when you don't throw interceptions, you throw touchdowns. That's pretty good. I think the key to Illinois' offense, obviously, is when they've been balanced. They've been able to legitimately run the football enough, which I didn't think they could do last year, which put more pressure on him. Now, that's going to be the key. Pressure, yes, in passing situations, but will they be able to run the football against Penn State effectively to keep the quarterback out of those long passing situations? And, Penn State now, I mean, James Franklin wanted big plays. He's getting big plays, with the new offensive system.
Yes.
Not just from the pass. When everybody says big plays, we think receivers. He's getting out of the running backs, obviously more so Singletary, but Allen. So they're balanced too. But they are big play balanced.
This is where it gets interesting for me, and I've asked everyone who's come on this week about this, so why would I stop with the two of you? I think the offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, against Aaron Henry, defense coordinator, to me that's the most interesting matchup. Aaron Henry has talked to us a ton about, I watched the video of the Kansas game from last year 100 times in preparation for Kansas, but the offensive coordinator last year was Andy Kotelnicki for Kansas.
Right.
Now he's at Penn State. And so I would think that he learned a lot about Kotelnicki in watching that video 100 times, which seems like a really depressing way to spend your summer.
Right.
But that aside, what do you think of that matchup, and how important is that? I know you talked about the other side of it, but what about that side?
I think the schedule may help Aaron Henry in this. If you look at both teams, Penn State had the one good win at West Virginia. Other than that, they've played Bowling Green, and they played another MAC team,
Penn State.
And so I think that matchup that you're talking about, I think is a balanced matchup, but I think because of the schedule that Illinois plays, it really gives Aaron Henry maybe a little bit of an edge. But Kotelnicki's going to do what he does. I mean, we watched him at practice. He's very creative. Yes. I mean, he does a great job. You've coached defense more than I have, Dave. I think if I'm coaching defense or trying to consult with my defensive coordinator, I don't think we need to go in if I'm Aaron Henry with a big package. The last thing I want is a big package on my side, defending a big package on that side.
Yeah, staying with that, well, Henry, obviously, great job. Particularly when you look at the Nebraska game, they rose up on defense. In overtime, would they have 3 sacks in overtime?
Yes.
I mean, to
on
me,
4 snaps.
right?
Yeah.
Out of 4, I mean, this Illinois team, and I'll include everybody on this. This Illinois team, I think they're a mature team. They're a tough team. They've been down. That place, Nebraska, we both coached there. I don't care how good the teams are. It's a tough place to play. And this team handled it mentally, Illinois, extremely well. And the one guys I'm going to give some love to, my biggest concern last week was, would Illinois' offensive line, and we talked about it, Jer, would they be able to handle the 3-3-5 defense scheme-wise of Nebraska? They did a great job with it. That offensive line from Illinois, they impressed me. They really did.
And now, to Jerry's point, that becomes the big question again, right? And it's interesting to look at Penn State's defense because they led the nation in sacks last year. They only have 4 this year. And I know that's an imprecise way, or maybe not a total viewpoint of what a team's doing in terms of pressuring the quarterback. But they're 74th in the nation in pressure rate, Jerry. So that's below bottom half of the country. So not only are they not getting home with the sacks, but they're not necessarily affecting the quarterback nearly as much as they did a year ago. What do you see that as a function of?
The big plays that they've had against them. Tom Allen has not gotten off to a fast start with this defense. We've all sat in the green room and watched a bunch of the plays that they've run. They've given up more big plays than I know Tom Allen wants to give up. So my guess is maybe he doesn't feel like he can pressure as much as he'd like to with his personnel because it hasn't been overly effective.
No, it hasn't. And, a lot has to do, and I don't know Tom's exact philosophy, but I know from having coached to it, we used to coach our guys a lot of times, play the run on the way to the quarterback, just with the call, Jerry. So you make your defensive call, think about it, and say our hot word was jet. We make the call and we say jet. That tells those guys up front.
Play pass first.
Play pass first, right, which is very unusual. Manny Diaz had that from Miami days. I was at his practices there. They would play the run half the time on the way to the quarterback. So a lot has to do with how much you turn those guys loose a lot of times, too. I don't know if that's the case here, but it could be a little bit.
I'll tell you, though, Altmaier was hit at Nebraska right after he threw the ball a couple times. He showed great courage in the pocket.
Absolutely.
He took some shots, but he was accurate on the way to taking the shot.
Been a great story, how improved he is this year, and he has gotten a lot of praise from opposing coaches, and deservedly so. He had a lot of problems with turnovers last year. He's yet to throw an interception this year, so a big part of the reason the Illini are undefeated. So that one under the lights tomorrow. We got a good one under the lights tonight. Washington and Rutgers. And Rutgers is 3-0. And on one hand, Wanda, you look at this and say, well, they've done this a lot, right? This is the 4th straight year.
Right.
They've started 3-0. You spent a lot of time there this summer, and I know you believe that this Rutgers 3-0 is different from some other 3-0s. Tell me why.
Yeah, Rev, I think that, and I know Greg believes this, that it's the best team he had that is balanced on offense. And with Ethan Kalimanis on that, running it as a dual threat, run pass, and his passing ability, the way that they're structuring up there with Kirk Soraka, it's a lot of movement passes, it's a lot of high percentage throws, and then they'll take the shots. So my point is that when you play Rutgers now, hey, they got arguably the best back in the conference, right? And they got 2. The Brown kid, what's his name? Samuel Brown.
Yep.
He's a heck of a player. I was watching that game against Virginia Tech, and he made some plays that were outstanding. So they can run the ball. We all know that, okay? But now you've got that added ingredients that you got to be a little bit conservative on this one. And you know that Chiano's teams are going to play sound defense. You always better be spending extra time on your punt block and field goal block. So, I just like them as a team. I think they're balanced in all areas, Jerry.
This is so Greg Schiano, the way he has built this program. Seriously, it's toughness, it's defense, it's the kick game. we've seen, the three of us were at the same practice this fall camp, how efficient they are at practice. The interesting thing is it's all about 1st and 10 when you're a run offense and when you're an option offense. You want to balance it up. People say they're working on the pass game. It's not 3rd and long they're working on. They're working on the pass game 1st and 10. And typical of Greg Schiano, when they were playing opponents earlier in the year, when they didn't need to throw it on 1st and 10, they threw it on 1st and 10. Why? Because they knew whatever date tomorrow is, tonight is rather, they knew they were going to go against a Washington team. And so they're in a position now to be more balanced on 1st and 10 so they can play some of the better teams in the conference. And it's just the way Greg does things. It's one step at a time. He's always looking at the big picture, and we're going to see that unfold tonight on 1st and 10.
And they're playing a really good defense in Washington.
Yes.
Steve Belichick's done an excellent job. They had the one game, obviously, against Wazoo that didn't go exactly how they would want it to. But, man, this defense, I mean, they've given up 41 points in 4 games. And you take out the Wazoo game, and they've been absolutely lights out. So what have you seen in terms of that matchup against Rutgers?
There's a little bit of history here. Steve Belichick was a lacrosse player at Rutgers. And Greg Schiano, his dad, Bill, said, my son can long snap. So when I was coaching at Pitt, Steve Belichick was the long snapper for Greg Schiano. Let me add another layer to it. I know you love the story.
Tell me about this Bill Belichick guy, his dad. I'm
well,
not familiar with him.
He used to coach. He's like Jerry and I are right now at the present, but he used to coach, okay?
I'll look him up.
He's into the media. Trevor, he's a media guy.
I'm not sure I'm exactly like him, but thank you.
And but the storyline is most people don't even realize this or forget that Belichick had a defensive coordinator's job open before he went to Ohio State, and guess where Schiano went and was the defensive coordinator at the Patriots, and Steve Belichick was on that staff. So if anybody understands how multiple Washington is and can be, it's Greg Schiano. I mean, he was in there with the playbook and all the dad's thoughts. He's got them. So it's a real interesting little sidebar, I think, to this game as far as because they will be multiple. I mean, Belichick, if they played a 4-3 last week, you might see a 3-4 this week. I mean, if they didn't pressure, they might pressure. I mean, that's his dad's mentality, and you better be smart, because they're going to come up with some schemes to try to take advantage and eliminate the thing best. What does Rutgers do best? And I know Bill. That's what he would write on the board.
Yeah.
Stop the thing they do best, and then we'll figure it out.
And I think that's what's really cool about Rutgers this year. And this is the point that both of you guys were getting to: is Virginia Tech stopped what Rutgers does best, largely, right? Kalman Ungai was reasonably held in check, and they basically said, Ethan Kalakmanis, can you beat us?
Right.
And he did.
Right. The one thing, Belichick doesn't have a lot of experience is defending the option. That's something they have to worry about in the NFL. But, I was at practice at Washington. I mean, he does a heck of a job coaching. They've got good players. I mean, this Washington team, I know there's a lot of people that come in and out of these programs nowadays, but they got good players. This is going to be a heck of a game.
I think it's exceptional for the way that they had to cobble it together. I mean, for all that they lost and for the time frame, it's pretty amazing. It's hard to evaluate talent correctly, as you guys know, and it just feels like with the immediacy of the portal, there's going to be a lot of hit and miss. It feels like they hit more than they missed, which is pretty impressive.
And Jed Fish, the job he did at Arizona, there's something, you always want your players to be confident. There's a lot to a coach being confident. Jed was confident before he was a head coach, and then he proved that he could take that Arizona program to places where it hadn't been for a while. So he has a lot of confidence about him. And you go to practice, you go through the facility, it's really a neat feel, this Washington program. It's very interesting.
And we're talking about the numbers, what was it, around 60 new players on this roster, right? All combined. I mean, that's crazy. And the thing that he did, he struggled in last week against Northwestern, right? They came out and scored 3 out of their first 4 possessions. So they came out of that locker room ready to play. So
against a pretty good defense.
Against a pretty good defense.
Not a great offense, but it's pretty good defense.
Absolutely.
that Northwestern had. And they went right down in that first half and took control of the game. Back to football, just one game for us tomorrow, but it is a great one. The undefeated Indiana Hoosiers collide with Maryland. Coverage begins with Big Ten Tailgate live from Bloomington, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network. and the Fox Sports app. Jerry, Indiana set all kinds of records here. Offensively, I mean, they have the most points, not just in the first 4 games of a season. They have the most points in any 4-game stretch in school history in the first 4 games here of the Curt Cignetti era. Now, I thought it was interesting that in the immediate aftermath of the Charlotte game, he very quickly put a damper on some of that talk. He said, hey, we have not played that difficult to schedule, and that is true. However, they've been annihilating people. So how good do you think Indiana is?
I think they're really good, and they're really consistent. I mean, talk about 2 teams that come at it in a different way. Maryland's, in my opinion, been inconsistent. They lose to Michigan State at home. Curt Cignetti has his team playing well every year and every week, and I think they're very consistent. I do think this game's going to come down to what I think a lot of games are going to come down to because of the quarterback position. Now with the portal, I think quarterbacks have more of an impact on these matchup games. If you look at Maryland and Indiana, I would say most likely, I didn't go to Maryland's practice, you did, or I didn't go to Indiana's as well. I think Maryland probably has more talent from top to bottom. Indiana's playing more consistent. And I think there's a motion to Curt Cignetti's coaching. I think his teams have been ready to play, as the term we would use, Dave, in coaching, right? Did I get my team ready to play, meaning emotionally? I'm not sure Maryland has been emotionally ready to play every game. So how good do I think they are? Obviously, this game will tell us more than the previous 4 games. And it was, he beat UCLA in the Rose Bowl.
Handily.
Handedly. And so when he said no other Indiana coaches had an easy schedule, if you look at the other 3, maybe, but that UCLA win in the Rose Bowl,
good win.
There's not a lot of Indiana coaches that could have beaten UCLA.
Agreed, and it's not just that they won. I mean, it's how they're beating people, crushing people.
Right. So how does UCLA compare to Maryland? I don't know, but that would be the most favorable.
We're fixing to find out, as you like to say.
We're fixing to find out.
Yeah, and they have started fast. The other thing too, you got to admit, they have built a lot of depth. Because of running up the scores like this, they've had their backup players in there in the 3rd and 4th quarter, which are giving them experience, which will pay off for them down the road. The one thing that they haven't done, they haven't faced adversity yet. And that's how we don't know how they're going to respond when the coaches, the players, the team, when they're behind and they're being pressed. Can Maryland do that? They absolutely can. I think the real key for Maryland is the run game. And I know that Roman Hemby is back healthy. He's playing good. But Billy Edwards is a dual threat quarterback. And I think that they got to threaten Indiana with the possibility, at least, by doing it a few times, not just the passing game. Hey, but how do you want to get him to back off Ty Felton a little bit, who might be the offensive MVP in the Big Ten, the way he's going? How do you get him to get it some one-on-one coverage? And how can we get the football to him? Well, you got to run the ball. You got to make Indiana commit to stopping the run. And if you can add the quarterback in with the running back, boy, that makes such a huge difference. And I think that's where I'm going to kind of keep my focus. And their defense is playing good here. I mean, they come up with negative plays. I wouldn't say they're dominating, on defense, Maryland. But I mean, they come up with tackles for losses, and they come up with sacks, and they're playing hard.
Ton of turnovers, too. That's something they've done really well.
Turnover. Yep. Mike Locksley needs to win this game. I don't want to use the word pressure, but this is a big game for him because it's a conference game, right?
Yeah, you look at Maryland last year, right? They're 5-0, right? And the narrative was, now that they're 5-0, when they play Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, how are they going to measure up?
Right.
They lose to all 3 of those. And a lot of people would lose to all 3 of those, but they lose to Northwestern and Indiana as well, because all anybody was talking about this Maryland program was they're taking the next step. There is no next step. It's 1 week at a time. When you start looking at the next step is usually when it happens where maybe you could have beaten Northwestern, maybe you could have beaten Indiana last year. And so this is a big game. I think there is a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot to the emotion of the game. And sometimes I just don't think Maryland buys into the emotion as much as they buy into the talent that they have on the field.
Well, this is the narrative, fairly or unfairly, is that in conference games, they just haven't fared well. They're 14-28 under Mike Locksley in conference games. They've been tremendous in non-conference games. And I mean, like that Virginia game, the way they went and won that game, That's a good win against a team that is certainly of the quality of many teams in the Big Ten, but there is a difference, again, when it's a conference game and for whatever reason it hasn't worked out. We'll see whether it happens.
But with the East Division disappearing, I mean,
they have a better chance.
This is a great opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
And they need to take it, but they've already lost one conference game to a team that has a new coach and probably doesn't have the same talent when they lost to Michigan State in College Park.
No doubt, yeah. And now you're facing another new coach who seems to have things rolling. So how do you match up against them? An unbeaten team there, obviously, in Indiana. We have an unbeaten team in East Lansing as well. Ohio State going to Michigan State. The Buckeyes have kind of rolled through inferior opponents. What has stood out, though, as you've watched them, Wani, taking the quality of who they're playing out of the equation?
Yeah, taking that out, Ryan Day and his staff are heck of evaluators. Right, because they haven't missed. You think of the players that they brought in with them, right? I mean, as far as Judkins, the running back, the freshman receiver. I mean, they've evaluated the portal guys and their incoming freshmen as good as anybody in the country. And a lot of times when you're the type of program they are, you can just go to the magazines and say, who's the 5 stars? Okay, bring these guys in. They're not doing that there. They're evaluating these guys, and they're doing a great job of it. And guess what? They're all showing up and playing at a high level. So, you combine the guys that he was able to keep that could have gone to the NFL, particularly that defensive line, and the newcomers. God, I mean, just a fantastic job,
Okay, they've always had talent. I mean, I can remember back in the day when we were playing, me and my teammates would watch Ohio State. We don't want to play. I mean, nobody looked like them. So they've always had talent.
This was at Notre Dame where you guys were winning national championships.
I know, but we still didn't.
Podunk State. No, I'm just clarifying for our viewers the difference, right?
But now Ryan Day, think about what Ryan Day has done the last couple of years, okay? He fixes the defense by hiring Jim Knowles.
Yep.
And you watch their defense playing now, I mean, they are unbelievable. They look like an NFL defense the way they fly around in the ball. Then, after calling plays for most of his career, he gives up the play calling, and he hires Chip Kelly,
who's a head coach in a Power 5 school. Right?
I know, and when you look at when you coach a defense and you're looking at the hit chart, I mean, you've got to defend the option, you have to defend pocket pass, you have to defend direct runs. I mean, it doesn't stop with Chip. And so, if there was ever a time when there was a program that has the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes, I suggest to you it's this year's Ohio State team.
So, what do you do if you're Michigan State going up against him, Coach?
Don't self-destruct. I would tell my team, guys, we got to eliminate penalties. We can't turn the football over, anything, and we can't give up sacks. I mean, you give up 4 or 5 sacks in a game, you're out of it. You end up punting. You're not going to overcome that versus Ohio State. So I would keep it as clean as possible. The quarterback, in my mind, is struggling right now. They know that. He's going to be a good player. I mean, I would put this thing on our run game somehow, some way, and try to take the air out of the football and keep Ohio State off the field. That's how you defeat them.
This Jonathan Smith has done an incredible job. I mean, he really has to take the players that he has and to win some of the games that he's won. He beats Maryland at Maryland, just loses to Boston College. This is a tough out, obviously,
yes.
No doubt. But Jonathan Smith, who reminds me so much of Mark D'Antonio, Jonathan Smith will find some way to get this team prepared, and he will get something positive out of this game, no matter what happens. That's how he coaches.
I know I had my notes. I did my homework here somewhere.
A lot of notes there,
Coach. A lot of notes, and my eyes are going. But think of this series: fumble, kickoff. Next possession, interception.
That was brutal.
Next possession, give up a 40-yard touchdown pass. I mean, that's self-destructing that I was making a point on. They obviously can't do that against anybody, let alone the Buckeyes.
The turnovers have been a huge issue. They got 10 turnovers. It's the most in the Big Ten. If you hand Ohio State extra possessions in advantageous field position, it's a recipe for disaster. So we'll see. Aiden Shell's got to make good decisions with the football tomorrow.
You better make them quick.
For them to have a chance. Yeah, there's some guys coming.
Good, quick decisions.
Yeah, those Jimmies and Joes are coming after him. Well, don't miss a Saturday night volleyball doubleheader here on the Big Ten Network. 3 ranked teams in action. Number 11, Oregon, hosting Indiana in the nightcap, but it starts at 6:30 Eastern with Purdue and Minnesota, two top 20 teams. Should be a great one, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. And in a stunning coincidence, our big interview today is Gophers head coach Keegan Cook. Coach, great to have you. We had you on last year just as you were embarking on your first year at Minnesota, so wonderful to talk to you again. It's been an interesting start to the year for your team. You lost 3 of your first 4 games, and the one win in there was against the number 1 team in the country in Texas. So explain that to a simple man like me.
Yeah, 6 points, right? We played 20 sets of volleyball in 4 matches. We lost 3 matches by a total of 6 points, and the margins are thin is what I told our team when I would tell you. So, yeah, we got a lot of experience, and thankfully all that experience helped us this week in a pretty big moment.
You did have a huge moment this week. You're coming off a great win on Wednesday against Minnesota, and similar to some of those other big matches you were talking about, this one was nip and tuck. You guys were down 2 sets to 1, heading to the 4th set. You win the last 2 to win the match. What did that tell you about your team?
Yeah, there's some learning going on. You know, we saw some familiar themes, especially in the 5th set. We went up pretty big late. We let Wisconsin back in to make it a 2-point set. And get to these big moments where you're looking at every single behavior from your athletes during the play and in between points. And the most important thing is just that we were swinging to win that match at the end. We've seen our players being a little tentative in those moments, but not in that moment. You know, Julia Hansen especially taking a big swing there to win that match after having a few chances down at Baylor and TCU. So you see growth, you see learning, you got to make sure you celebrate it and make it a part of who you are.
When you say you look at every behavior of your team, unpack that for me. What does that mean? What are you looking at?
Yeah, the ball's in play. You know, in a 5-set match, the ball might be in play for a total of 3 minutes. That's a lot of downtime in a 2.5-hour match. And so you're looking at, confidence, eye contact, communication, how often are your athletes giving each other high fives and double checking, assignments. And, in that 5th set, just told them, let's make sure we're good in the spaces in between points. And then when the play starts, you'll know what to do. And I thought I saw some improvement in that.
I mentioned this is your 2nd year at Minnesota. So last year, a little bit of a transition year, although you guys made the NCAA tournament, had a good year by most measures. But what did you learn about Minnesota's program in year 1 as you kind of tried to get the lay of the land?
Yeah, just the things that were in place, that can support a coaching staff, right? You find out when things aren't going so great, just who's behind you and what structures is in place. And I was amazed coming night back to the PAV. We let them down a lot here in some close matches, and I'd show up the next night and the arena would be full. And so, this week was a big moment for us to give a moment back to a community that supports us unconditionally. And it just reminds me, when you have that kind of support, you're somewhere special.
Well, you guys had a ton of support on Wednesday night, and you have been a really good defensive team here early on this year. What has made that a strength of your team?
Yeah, shared mentality at the net and behind it. Every single player on the floor has committed to a certain level of effort and intensity on the defensive side of the ball. Serving was a strength last year. It's even better this year. And so just a really strong foundation and mentality. And the offense is coming along. And we're going to need every bit of our defensive ability here against a great Purdue team coming up.
Well, that's the thing with this league. It is good teams game in and game out. We'll get to that Purdue game coming up here this weekend in just a moment. I do want to ask you, though, it's interesting because you came from Washington where you had incredible success. And now, obviously, Washington and some other schools from the former Pac-12 have joined the Big Ten. You don't go out to UW this year, but have you thought at all about what it's going to be like to be on the sideline opposite them when they come to play you guys in Minneapolis?
Yeah, it's certainly some small moments, and, I've gotten a chance to see the former coaching staff, see the athletes in some other spaces over the past year, whether that's weddings or USA Volleyball events, and really, share some gratitude and thank them for that time we had together. I'm excited. I'm excited for the season they're having. I'm excited to welcome them to the PAV. Excited for just the kind of quality match I'm expecting. But yeah, nothing better than competing against your friends and colleagues fiercely. We only get so many nights to do this, and I'm looking forward to welcoming them here to Minnesota. You
got UCLA and USC next week. You've got Oregon coming up next month. To what extent, if any, does your familiarity with those programs help you, do you think, in terms of this transitioning to this larger conference? Does it give you a leg up in any way, Coach?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sometimes in this business, ignorance is bliss. If you know something, it's easy to worry about it. So I know the road trips, I know the restaurants and the paths,
right?
Days work, the venues. No, whatever 10 plus years in the Pac-12 gives me, we'll share it with our athletes. And I think better the enemy that you know than the one you don't. So I feel good about it that at least there's 4 schools in this conference that I know how to compete against and have a decade of experience. The rest, we're figuring it out.
I love your story, and we talked a little bit about it when we had you on last year, but you were introduced to volleyball through your sister and just kind of got into it and played some yourself, but always kind of wanted to be a coach. What inspired you to coach? What made you think this was the right path for you?
Yeah. Again, you find your place in the game. My mind was ahead of my body pretty early. I realized, I had some tough moments, cut from some teams that I wanted to make, not getting the kind of attention I wanted. But ultimately, I had some great mentors. I had a tremendous high school coach, tremendous club circuit coaches. And it's a big deal to have those experiences early and then think, okay, this is what I'm called to do. And it's the only other job I've had besides washing golf clubs and serving ice cream. So, it's been a part of my life ever since my younger years, and certainly something I really thoroughly love.
Your wife, Sarah, was an All-American at Texas A&M. To what extent, if any, does she chime in on your coaching decisions?
Yeah, a lot of support. She's the best competitor in our family, as she reminds me often, and certainly the better athlete by a landslide. But you can't, it's not a one-person gig. It brings your whole family in, and that starts with Sarah, and she's been all the places I've been and more. And man, she's awesome. She's an All-American player, an All-American wife and mother. And yeah, we're out here in Minneapolis. We love it out here. We love that we get to raise our family in this community. And it's hard. There's not a lot of hours of sleep, as we talked about. But right now, we're loving being here.
Well, the thing keeping you up at night perhaps now is the matchup with Purdue that you alluded to coming up here this weekend. Give us a little bit of a scouting report, if you would, on what you need to focus on with the Boilers.
Yeah, a couple things stand out. Situationally, I think they've lost a couple matches here that I think they'd expect to win. Particularly their home opener in the Big Ten in a really high level match against Penn State. Offensively, just tremendously dynamic. At least 3 players who we know are going to be doing big things, both outside hitters and a middle blocker who are special. But yeah, motivation is a big deal. We're coming off a win, they're coming off a loss at home. We got to make sure that we meet that moment. Again, pull them into some longer rallies. Don't let it be an offensive shootout, which I think favors them. So we got to control the tempo of the match a little bit. We got to make sure that our serving shows up as it normally does. And I don't know, it's a sold out crowd. 2 teams that have a lot to prove, and it should be a good show and a value ticket, as most of our matches have been this year.
Well, I know those who do not have a ticket are looking forward to watching here on the Big Ten Network, part of that really good doubleheader coming up tomorrow night. Keegan Cook, really a pleasure to visit with you again. Thanks for giving us some of your time.
Yeah, you guys are the best. Appreciate you.
Well, don't forget, if you love volleyball, you do not have to wait till tomorrow. We've got it tonight on the network. Red hot, second-ranked Nebraska take it on UCLA, followed by number 20 USC against Ohio State. The volleyball doubleheader begins at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. We continue to get you ready for the football weekend with Wisconsin and USC. You see some of the storylines. Braden Locke will be the starting quarterback for Wisconsin after the injury to Tyler Van Dyke. Miller Moss coming off a solid game in a losing effort against Michigan, but the issue for the Trojans was they could not stop the Wolverines on the ground. So both of these teams coming off of tough losses. And as you think about kind of the mindset, let's start with Wisconsin. Not only did they lose to Alabama, it wasn't that close. They lost their starting quarterback. They had a week to digest it. So what do you think about how the Badgers approach this one?
I think as a coaching staff, you look at it and you don't just look at we're playing USC. That's the next opponent. But after USC, we have Purdue, we have Rutgers, we have Northwestern. So obviously tough out, going out to Los Angeles. new quarterback. So what could we get done during the off week to get ready to beat USC, of course, but also if that doesn't happen, or even if it does happen, are we in position now to come out of our bye and get on that string of Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern, and be ready for that, especially at the quarterback position?
Yeah, you know, when I look at Wisconsin, obviously the quarterback position, they've got their hands full there as far as getting him on track and getting the most out of him. But, you know, I've always thought when you take over a relatively new job, and I know this is Luke's second year, that there's so many holes in the dike that you're trying to fill the first time. We both know that, Jerry. But I've always thought that you better be darn sure, why did you get hired? Because of my defensive expertise or my offensive expertise. And the thing that I'm a little bit baffled by is their defense. You know, I mean, 7 plays over 20 yards. That, you know, Wisconsin defense, when they couldn't throw the ball, they could at least play outstanding defense and keep their teams in the game. So if I'm Luke Fickell, I'm really looking hard at this defense this week and saying, okay, I know we're going to have to be a little conservative on offense, okay, because of the quarterback. But guys, if we're going to win this game or have a chance, we need to play lights out on defense. I mean, that's going to be our best chance to win this football game.
You know, second-year programs are really tricky. I always say, you know, when you get to a program, it's easy. You implement what you want to do, but the adjustments you make between year one and year two. Wisconsin went to a bowl game last year, right? They lost a bowl game on the final drive against an LSU team. And so people automatically said, okay, if they won 7 last year, it's 8 this year. You know, it's just doesn't work that way. And so Luke's, you know, he's under a lot of pressure to make this thing work, but it's only his second year. I know that's hard for fans to understand.
You can win too fast, can't you?
Yeah.
I just think that it's a program where they've made a bowl game every single year.
They have a record right now,
right? Yes, they do.
I know.
Yes, and so kind of the bar is, hey, how are we going to
reminded
get to
every night at home that they have a record and they better go this year.
How are we going to get to the next level? That was the logic behind the hire, and it just feels like identity-wise.
Yes.
I'm still trying to figure out who they are. I'm trying to figure out who they are on offense. He went to the air raid. They're not particularly explosive. Now, what's interesting is Braden Locke, you know, what they're saying this week is, hey, he knows the offense really well because this is his second year in this system, whereas with Van Dyke, it was his first year. So maybe even though Van Dyke, obviously, talent-wise is really good, maybe that'll help a little bit in terms of it not being as huge an adjustment to a backup quarterback, but a challenging spot, no doubt. What about Michigan and Minnesota? Michigan, the talk all week, Jerry, has been about this offense. And yes, they beat USC, but they only had 32 passing yards. Can you do this against elite opponents? Is this sustainable? I'll start with you as an old offensive coordinator, and then obviously, Wani, interested in your take from the other side. But is it? I mean, can you do this? Can you be who Michigan wants to be with an offense that generated 32 passing yards in a big game, but still won the game?
Yes, you can. You can improve on the passing game, but that's not the most important thing. If you watch the USC game, which we all watched, if you noticed, running back carried the ball most of the time. There's good things and bad things about the option. One of the bad things about the option is basically the defense dictates who carries the ball because you're reading a certain player. If that player takes the dive, the quarterback keeps it. This offense has to be more diverse when it comes to the option. Alex Orji did not carry the ball one time on an option play. That's more important than becoming better at the pass game. So, of course they're going to work on the pass game. But if they don't get the quarterback involved more in the option, they're going to be too easy to defend. So you say, how can they win big with not being able to pass? This year, I don't know that I'd be worried about winning big. I would be worried about teams that have less talent than I do beating me because I want to throw the ball and I can't. So take this in steps. I want to be able to line up against everybody that I'm playing against that I've been a talent than, which is most of the people.
Right.
And if I'm worried about throwing it to beat them, I'm going to lose to them, and I'm also going to lose to the teams that are better than me. If you're an option attack, you've got to make sure that the quarterback and the running back are both carrying the ball.
Yeah, see, I'm a believer in I would want my offense throwing the ball deep twice a half. I mean, you gotta throw it deep. You know,
That's what he does best, by the way. That's what Orgy does best.
Maybe pass interference, maybe completion, right? Don't you know?
Right.
I mean, and we got some players. We're going to get some one-on-one coverage because they're going to be defending the run. So, you know, I wouldn't go sophisticated passing game, but I would be taking shots down the field if I was Michigan.
Part of the issue is I'm not sure there are a ton of burners in that receiver group either. I mean, you know, everyone wants to hang it all on Orgy. Colson Loveland is far and away their best weapon in the pass.
But they're going to get one-on-one coverage because of their commitment to the run, and the defense is going to be fine. But let me tell you, last week against USC started a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, and 2 seniors in that offensive line. So the defense, you know, I mean, hey, they did a fabulous job. In my opinion, they were, you know, big time showed up with the sacks and everything with it. But it won't be that easy, I think, year after year because of the youth and the experience.
Right, but this week, what does the run-pass ratio have to be for Michigan to beat Minnesota?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at Minnesota's game last week, you say, we're going to run it until they prove they can stop it. I mean, this could be Penn State of last year, right? Unless Minnesota makes a huge jump. I mean, Iowa ran it all over them last week. So I don't know. Is the run-pass ratio 80 run? I don't know.
It could
75?
be. It could be. I'm just saying, when do you need to be a good passing team with Alex Orgy running the show? Not this week. So, you know, I agree with you. Throw it deep. And like I say, that's his best trait. He threw one deep last week against USC, which wasn't far off. And the more he does it, the more he's going to be better at it, obviously.
This may be the shortest game of the weekend because if Michigan's going to win, I tell you what, PJ, he's rowing the boat with that running game. I mean, they're key to that offense. Darius Taylor, 30 yards rushing last week. And I know it's Iowa, but hey, they got to be committed.
Running the ball more, throwing the ball more than he had.
Yeah, maybe.
Highest pass percentage at this point in the season in 17 years.
I don't know if I do it this week.
Yeah, he looks like he's evolving more to the pass game.
Good luck.
We shall see.
We shall see.
Yes. I have a couple of football games to get to. We don't have a whole lot of time because we've been jibber-jabbering the whole time. So it's going to have to be quick, but your headline thoughts on Oregon and UCLA.
UCLA, much improved team from the first game against Hawaii. Oregon hit their stride last week. But more important than that, a Big Ten game being played in the Rose Bowl between 2 conference teams, and they're UCLA and Oregon. How's that sound?
It's great.
It's totally cool.
Yeah, it's going to be
totally cool.
Yeah, UCLA tied with LSU at the half. You know what I mean? So they came out.
Yes.
We used the expression today a couple of times, having your team ready to play. UCLA was ready to play. The coaches did a nice job with them. And then, obviously, Oregon, they're making big plays. The Boise game kind of threw them off a little bit because of Boise's running game with their Heisman Trophy candidate. But they're back on track. Hey, don't let them get in the red zone. 10 red zone trips, 10 times they score points. They're pretty efficient. They're coming on. They're getting better.
Awfully good, no doubt. What about Nebraska and Purdue? Both of these teams trying to bounce back from disappointment a week ago.
You know, Nebraska, they didn't finish the game. In the fourth quarter is when Illinois dominated, made plays. But they're an improved team, but with a rookie quarterback, you're not good enough to have 5 sacks, 7 tackles for losses, 9 penalties. That stuff will kill you when you got a young quarterback and a young team in Nebraska.
Yeah, Purdue, hard team to figure, right? They open up against Indiana State. That wasn't much of a game. Then they have a week off, and then they get beat up really bad by Notre Dame. Then they go to Oregon State, and they don't look very good. Ryan Walters is a defensive coach. They had 10 plays of 15 yards or more given up by their defense against Oregon State. So before they go anywhere, this is a time when the head coach relies on whether he was an offensive or defensive guy. He gets to that defensive meeting room, and he better straighten out their defense before anything else happens good.
Run defense in particular, over 700 rushing yards allowed in the last 2 games.